Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jung-Wook Kim from DAY1 University in Busan, Korea. I'm very honored and happy to chair this session. The first session has 6 papers, and each papers will given 20 minutes, and I will inform when 15 minutes are gone, and so please keep time to present within 20 minutes. And each presenter can use the pointer watching the monitor, which is placed in front of the presenter. So now the first presentation the title is Informing Robot Ethics Architecture Through Folk and Expert Morality. The authors are Vidlan Surendran and Arthur Mello Cruz and Alan Wagner from Pennsylvania State University, and Jason Borenstein and Ronald Arkin, and Shenkang Chen from Georgia Institute of Technology. And the presenter will be Mr. Arthur Mello Cruz. Okay, please come here. You can use.
Not here. Thank you very much. Make sure that I know how it works. Yep. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Arthur Mello Cruz. Thanks for the introduction. I'm a PhD student at Penn State University. Today, I'm going to be presenting this paper that I was co-authored with a couple of folks from Penn State as well as Georgia Tech, Informing a Robot Ethics Architecture Through Folk and Expert Morality. And this project is funded by the National Science Foundation from Washington, D.C., United States. So this project essentially aims to create a computational architecture for an intelligent physical system that will be adaptable and ethical in its decision-making. So we're planning on hinging this on pretty much 2 things. The first one is using ethical frameworks as a basis for the robot's decision-making, as well as moral emotions as a guide for dominant ethical framework. And there will be 2 strategies for testing this. First one, we want to evaluate if the robot will act in a way that ethical experts would endorse. And the second one, we want to know if the robot would approximate human behavior in similar circumstances. So we got a couple of experiments that we're using to develop this. First one is a pill sorting exercise, which is more common for older adults who need to organize their pills they need to take daily or hourly. And the ethical dilemma here that we're studying is if you have a robot that is assisting the older adult, we want to know if deception is appropriate to use to encourage those patients to continue with their training if they're being trained on the pill sorting task. The second one is a Connect 4 game. This game is essentially each player, there's 2 players, each player has a different color. They have to connect 4 pieces in a row that will be either horizontal, vertical, or in a diagonal. And one player plays alternating with the other player. And the scenario that we're evaluating if there is a robot playing against a child or an older adult playing against a child teaching how to play the game, We want to know if it is acceptable to allow that child to win the game or let them cheat in the game of Connect 4. Looking a little bit into the literature, there are 3 primary methods proposed to create an intelligent, ethical, autonomous system. First one is to model the behavior of an ethically competent exemplar. So for example, if you have a person who is teaching the robot how to act ethically according to some set of ethical beliefs or something like that. The second one will be to pre-program well-grounded legal and ethical rules into the robot itself. And the third one would be using ethical theories as underpinnings for autonomous ethical reasoning. And this one is what we're exploring a little bit more in this paper. Our proposed system seeks to generate action recommendations from multiple ethical frameworks. So looking a little bit into the methodology, we had 2 surveys that we ran. The first survey was a folk survey. So we sent that out to a pool of respondents in the United States using Amazon Mechanical Turk. There were 104 responses, 4 were excluded due to incomplete or bad data. There's a distribution of ethnicity as well as education, as you can see here, educational level. On the left-hand side, we have an expert survey. We sent that out to what we identified as a proxy, being a philosophy professor who teaches ethics at an academic institution. We sent out 30 surveys to 30 potential experts, and we got 24 responses back. And besides the questions that we asked the folk survey, we also asked whether they decided if an action was appropriate based on their knowledge of a specific ethical framework. And I'll dive into this a little bit more in detail. The next slide. So this is looking a little bit more into the data for pill sorting particularly. So like I said, we asked on both folk and expert surveys their take on the following prompt. Is it okay to deceive a 70-year-old adult to keep them engaged with the task in the following circumstances? The first column there is the scenario, and we pretty much had 2 main variables for scenario. We had the performance, which was counting the number of mistakes made, and also the emotional state, which could be calm or frustrated. So the folks were essentially being asked if it would be okay to deceive or not based on those scenarios. The third column there is essentially for each expert, we asked based on 5 different ethical frameworks if they would think that it would be acceptable or not to deceive. So there are utilitarianism, ethics of care, virtue ethics, a couple of others, social justice theory, and I'm blanking on the other one, but you can find it in the paper. The second column there, you can see that for pill sorting, the dominant folks' response was no. So the majority of respondents were saying that it's not okay to deceive in all of those scenarios. And on the right column there, the closest expert framework match was utilitarianism in a lot of those. We also see a little bit of ethics of care, virtual ethics in between. One thing to note is that on the bottom 2 rows, they diverge from utilitarianism when there were no mistakes and the patient was calm, or no mistakes when they were very frustrated. And those 2 were social justice and ethics of care that were matching more closely between the expert and the folk responses. For the game playing with Connect 4, the prompt that was asked was, is it okay to play badly or let the child win in following circumstances? Again, we have performance and not moral emotion, but emotion in general. And the scenarios will vary against having 1 poor move in a game, 5 games played with no wins, and the 2 bottom rows there if the child is trying to break the rules in those scenarios as well, deliberately. We see here that the top 3 rows, the dominant folk response was yes, meaning it is okay to play badly, and the bottom 2, no. The top 3, virtue ethics dominating, the bottom 2, Kantian ethics. We also had an open-ended section for folks to input their verbal comments into the scenarios. And we analyzed that using inductive coding, which essentially means that we didn't have any preconceived notions about the data going in for the analysis. So all the trends and common responses were observed directly from the data itself. Left-hand side, for pill sorting, we see the vast majority opposing deception, 24.2% in favor of it. This is conforming to the yes or no questions that were asked. Top reason for opposing, mistakes can cause harm or death, so there's a risk at play in there. 45.8%, that means it's 45.8 over the 75.8 that we're opposing, not over the 100%. The top reason for accepting deception was around it serving as a means to make the patients practice more. On the game playing side, there's a little bit of a distribution across 3 different patterns. The first one, 24.2% in favor of playing badly or breaking rules, either. 38.5% against playing badly or breaking rules altogether. And 37.3% in favor of playing badly, but against breaking rules. The top reason here that was most seen was the child needs to learn how to be a good sport, and winning is not the sole end goal of the activity. That was about 25.7% of those who were opposing deception. And for allowing deception, the top reason was it helps the child gain confidence and encourages further playing. So that was about a third of the answers there. This is very similar to the pill sorting case as well for accepting deception. Excuse me. So going into conclusions now, essentially, we see there's a relationship between the task, what is involved in the task, and also the ethical framework at play. So for example, for pill sorting, we see that there's an attention to practical outcomes of deception, and that leads to the utilitarianism as the dominant framework, like we saw in the data. For game playing with Connect 4, there's more of an attention to social norms governing the game and the impact that it has on the child. And the dominant frameworks were Kantianism, virtual ethics, with empathy being the main virtue there. There's a little bit of evidence that certain types of scenarios or the features of a scenario, like the performance or the emotion, may foster the use of a specific ethical framework, like utilitarianism or Kantianism or virtual ethics. So for example, if you have a healthcare scenario that would have a relationship with the utilitarian reasoning, a cheating scenario, Kantian reasoning. And we can use this for developing robots in the sense that robots can directly select a framework to make decisions, utilitarian, Kantian, based on the scenario. They can predict which framework people use around to make decisions, and they will also predict a framework that will help it explain the decision making. So that gets a little bit into explainability. But we also have to look into the study limitations, take these with a grain of salt. First one, they're all self-reports on both surveys, so they may be a little bit different than actual behavior when those people are in the actual dilemma acting. A lot of experts are also mentioning that the additional context may be needed to make an informed decision, so not just performance and emotion. Another point is that there is limited generalizability of the results because it's only 100 sample size for default response and 24 for experts, and also only participants of the United States were selected. And the fourth one, there's a range of experts' opinions related to what ethical framework is more appropriate for each scenario. So there's no consensus there. So it's very hard to make a specific relationship between the scenario and the ethical framework in question based on that distribution. Here are some external references, pretty much for the literature review section that I covered. And if you'd like further information, these are our links to our labs, Penn State Robot Ethics and Aerial Vehicles Lab, and Georgia Tech Mobile Robot Laboratory. And these are the related papers to this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your talk. and thank you again for your keeping time. Do you have any question or comments on his talk? Anyone? We have 5 minutes.
One more point that I'd like to, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I can hear you.
Is one thing, but I don't see how you can then say, because we found this in relation to people and their reasoning about certain kinds of things, we can then transfer these ideas to these technological objects. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me how you can make that claim at all, that you can then develop any kind of digital computational system that is able to carry out any of those actions. And actually, most of the people, so when you're a parent and you want your child to learn how to be a good sport, you're not going to the library, you don't go and consult Kant and you go, oh, right, they want to learn about their agency. You do it through a number of things, and what happens is philosophers come along and they say, oh, we can map what they're doing onto there, but I could map what their parents were doing onto about 100 different theories. So you've just decided to select one theory to map it onto, then to map that onto something else. So I just wondered what you thought about that.
No, that's a very good point, and that's why I covered in here in the limitations, the fourth point on the bottom right. There's no consensus into which specific ethical framework relates to the situation, and there are variables at play there. So you're right on by saying that there is no way of directly pointing out. So that's why we try to gather data and see what the experts were trying to match with what folks were saying. So that was the best way that we found to do that kind of matching in there. But it certainly is a limitation because there's no way of making a direct point and say, hey, this is Kantian 100%, this is utilitarian 100%. So that's that's pretty much the best that we could do. Now, going into a little bit of implementation, my second talk later in this afternoon dives into a little bit on how the ethical frameworks are matched with what the robot is going to do in that situation. So I can talk a little bit more about that coming up.
Is there any more questions? Okay.
Thank you. I enjoyed your talk very much. So I think my question is somewhat related. There are a lot of ethical theories, right? So I think probably in the local culture and country here, I took a look at the religious makeup of the country. And it seems that we'd have a divine command framework associated with Catholicism, and for that matter, Protestantism. We'd have Confucianism in its ethics. We'd have a Buddhist ethical framework. So are you concerned about the obvious and undeniable number of ethical theories and frameworks when you're carrying out this kind of empirical research? Because you would presumably need, if I understand the methodology correctly, you'd need a lot of experts and a lot of people with expertise in a lot of these theories to see how they match up against what people are doing, if in fact they're reasoning systematically when they are subjects.
Yeah. Again, that's another very good point, and another thing that I covered here, the limitations on generalizability. I think the way to go forward on that sense is to, when we move from this to an actual implementation, is to make it scalable so that it can add new ethical frameworks or more data as it goes, and it's not constrained to the ones that are only studied in a particular moment in time. For this study particularly, we were focusing on the United States. We had a limited sample size, so we did what we could to select the ones that we thought was mostly at play. But definitely there's a concern for other frameworks and other types of experts and other ways of thinking. So when we start to implement it, that will be my second talk again, we have to make it in such a way that it's scalable so that when that data is captured, we have an easy way of incorporating it in. Does that kind of answer?
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I can't resist making the comment, though, when I see these kinds of investigations, empirically speaking, by far the dominant ethical theory that you're going to see coming out of parents in many cultures is a divine command one. I mean, it's God says don't do this, we don't do it, but we seem to have this sort of, I don't know, we decide that, we try to deny the empirical data about why people say they do things. But yes, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And because of time limit, let's move on to the next talk. Thanks so much. The second paper is about the learning method of data bias, employing machine learning for kids. And the presenter is Professor Hyo-eun Kim from Hanbad National University in South Korea.
Hello. Hi. This is my presentation. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Hyo-eun Kim, and I am a professor at Hanbad National University. I made AI ethics courses in Korea for the first time. And I want to mention first about the background. Yeah, they want me to. Yeah. So in this talk, I want to introduce and explain how I teach and educate a university student about how AI ethics. Especially, I want to focus on the method of combining a kind of the machine learning platform. For example, ML for kids. Maybe a lot of people know about machine learning for kids. So how to 어떻게 돌리는 걸까요, 이거? Is anybody how to turn the next page? Play on the left. Green one. Green one 이러는데. 네네. Oh, thank you. 네. So I thought that the methodology of combining to the machine learning platform is very important, not just learning by conceptually or theoretically, because the biases of AI is embedded in AI system, not just in the very abstract dimension. So I think the student is better to know how to construct AI, and then how AI biases is embedded on the every stage when AI system is constructed. So first I let students know that how AI is constructed. And then the biases on each stage of AI construction is very important. So this is the very short content that I teach to the student. So construction stage of artificial intelligence is various stages. It's not so simple. So training, so overall, training a model through machine learning based on given data to build a prediction system. But as many of you know, the data collection and the data processing is almost 80% about the whole process. So I emphasize the data is very important. And then in this talk, I especially focus on the data bias, not algorithmic bias. So the construction stages of AI is data collection and data pre-processing. Annotation takes a lot of time, and machine learning training, and not model, DEL, model validation and deployment. So I explained to the student that biases are embedded in every stage of the construction of the AI system. So my education of AI bias using machine learning platform are divided into two. The first, I use machine learning for kids. And the second, I want my students to know how to use the AI fairness like that. This is just one example, not the whole. So first, I want to my students understand and mitigating, not mitigating technically, but lawfully. They know how to raise questions when I face some AI systems. So let me explain a little about the machine learning for kids. Machine learning for kids, a lot of people use this as a means to learn AI or computer. But I use this as a learning method of education method of the AI bias. So I think this is a very effective way to for my students know how bias embedded in AI system. So I performed my this class as a project-based. This could be individual or team, but in my class I did this as individual basis. So first, they select a kind of AI-based system or robot depending on their interest. For example, AI sports umpire, or AI interview system, AI writer, etc. A lot of selections, options. And then they find what kind of data the selected AI robot would need to build. Then they write what kind of data they need. Then they summarize about 3 kinds of hypothetical situations to see how the results change depending on the kinds and amount the data is entered. So, and then they figure out which option would be better than others and provide your reasoning why. I ask them to write down. And then based on this process, they try this kind of process to machine learning for kids platform. So try to add trained data and see its result in ML for kids. And then they explain when data-related biases occur, how data should be selected and used to mitigate bias. So maybe you know about this platform. And this is very good because people all over the world, they select their language. So this is Korean and this is English. So here, the process is the train, the data, the enter the data, and the train, the machine learning, and then evaluation, and then build a model. So this is the image. One of my students did this, how he built, or how he trained, and how he used this ML4 Kids. And this example, you can see the baseball player. And he made this image instead of gathering data, because there are no good baseball ball or strike image data on the internet. So he made this. Actually, this making data is not what I'm intended for, but he just do it. And I think this is very good for his very voluntary learning. So he added all the data, and then he also do the second round, because he have to compare biased data or unbiased data. So he compared the result of test data with biased data and no biased data. So he found that the result is 70% ball, for example, versus 54% ball. And he found that even if one very tiny biased data result in the biased result. And also in the process, he come to know that how the bias is embedded in the every stage of the construction of the AI system. Actually, this is the Zoom. So he recorded the process of how he was doing. So actually, in my presentation, there's the recording, but I cannot control, so I cannot show. No, that's okay. This is the PDF format, so I cannot show that. So I like this. Actually, there are a lot of the AI, the learning platform, but I choose this comparing to other platforms. The machine learning for kids is very more useful than other platform, because ML for kids deal with a lot of kind of the format, image, behavior, and motion, and text. So I want my students deal with every kind of data. And another good point for of ML for kids is we can perform with programming language like Scratch and Python. So this means that we can do the education, this kind of education combined with the coding education. So I think this AI bias, AI ethics education can vary a lot of kinds. So we can develop very kind of AI ethics class, I guess. And also, I also asked students to discuss about which kind of fairness is appropriate for the issue they are dealing with. So this education is also related to the social or the governance issues. So on the second round, I also want, this is my individual the intending, how my students develop their ability to discern and mitigate AI bias. So I showed my student the IBM's AI fairness. So IBM's AI fairness, it can track, mitigate a bias very easily. But it's very important that this is not the all. If this is not the all, just technology can solve every problem. But you can see here's the choose sample data, and then check bias metrics, and then choose bias mitigation algorithms. But how we can choose? We people
5 minutes are left.
Yeah, people have to choose, not the technology itself. So I told the student that this is the point we humans have to deal with this kind of AI bias situations. So they try to do this according to my guidance. Okay, this is it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any question or comment?
Hi, thank you very much for that. I think it's really important work as well to get students thinking about these issues very early on. And I'm curious, how did your students respond to the learning, to the experience of understanding bias in it? Were they surprised, or did it change their behaviors, I guess, as well? So I'm quite curious as what happened after this experience of trying to look at the way in which bias can be embedded in data.
Yeah, thank you for your question, because I really would like my students develop their own ability, not just gather some knowledge about AI bias. So after doing this, I got the feedback, and most of the students said to me that, oh, this is the AI ethics class, but now I become some knowledge about how AI is constructed. So this is the AI ethics class, but this is also can be combined. That means it can be combined with the AI class. Of course, it's a very elementary stage. And then they said that I now know that how I can raise a question when I for example, just in case I face some situation where I got an interview, AI interview, then I got a result, then I don't know how this result come out, and then I infer, and I can I can infer that maybe some data was biased, but maybe the company did not answer. Then as a as a citizen, we can raise a question, but very concretely, not just abstractly. So we can, we as a citizen, I'm sorry, we can raise a question and not just got a demonstration, and then we ask the society to change some biased data or biased some technological elements. So that's what I'm intending for, and they know how to do that, I think.
Thank you.
Okay, because of time limit, okay. Thank you for your interesting talk.
Thank you.
The title of the third paper is Good for AI, and the presenter is Professor Shin Kim from Hankuk University of Foreign Studies in South Korea.
Can you hear me? Right, good. It's very nice to be here, and
마이크를 좀 가까이 좀. 네네.
I guess I should begin by apologizing that that title is just too big a title for a 20-minute presentation, right? Not only that, what I'm reporting today isn't a result, but rather it's where our or my investigation is heading, right? So let's see. Right. So what I'm talking about, given time limit, is going to be something that begins with a question that I'm trying to answer. And then in the end, I'll give you somewhat of an intermediate result for what I take the concept of good for AIs from their own perspectives, right? So the question is this one, right? Humans understand the word good in different contexts as meaning different things. Sometimes we mean to say it is efficient. Sometimes we mean to say that it is what I like, right? Or sometimes even there's something that's captured in objective world, something like moral realist would accept, right? But would a robot or AI be able to do the same, right? And obviously what I'm trying to say is that it should be able to, right? And that question perhaps is same thing as asking when we talk about robot ethics, are we talking about ethics in robot production, manipulation, control, or are we talking about the reasons why robot should act ethically, right, for their own perspective? And what I'm trying to say is going to be something in the line that they should be able to answer them their own ways. Of course, there are many obstacles in answering the question in that positive way, but what I'm going to suggest is that it's not fairly clear even for the humans to do the same, right? So as you perhaps have seen in the outline, right, the sentence or normative claim, right, it doesn't make much of, I guess, ambiguous or vague claim, right, towards our own, I guess, understanding of the word, the normative word. But it perhaps wouldn't be the same for the robot, right? And the things that I'm asking is that whether, right, it be able to distinguish different senses or various senses of the normative sentence that we are looking at, right? I guess I could look at it there. I don't have to look at there, right? Now, perhaps the immediate response that we can give is that it's not really something that a robot can do, right? And there's a lot of issues that comes with it, right? If one lacks autonomy, if one lacks internal kind of affairs, right, or internal lives, so to speak, of their own, then they won't be able to express their own, form their preferences or toward any kind of states of affair or toward a person, right? And that goes fairly, I guess, well with the claim that, the robots can make good sense of the word good from their own perspective, right? But certainly that would be something of a hasty response, right? I'm thinking that we shouldn't be doing this, especially when we ourselves are not in total understanding of how human minds work, right? And I think it is something that we owe, right, to ourselves and for the AIs as well in perhaps answering it and what's required in investigating what's required in answering the question in an affirmative way, right? And that's what I'm hoping to, I guess, do. And certainly, as I said at the outset, I haven't had the result. I'm simply reporting what and toward what direction I'm heading. Right? Before we go any further, right, the meta-ethical pursuits, the question about the concept of the good or the concept of bad, the right, the wrong, and all those normative concepts, one of the pursuits that meta-ethics or meta-ethicists is investigating. But more fundamentally, right, there's also a question about why one has to act ethically, why have to be moral, right? And these pursuits, what seems to be independent from each other, certainly interconnected, and what I'm guessing is that they are one pursuit, in certain kind of priorities, right? If one cannot answer the question of one kind, perhaps one would not be able to answer the question of the second kind either. And that's what I call the unity thesis, but I guess we'll look at them shortly. Now, the concept of good, I think I did mention that in a very brief manner already. And we do fairly well with different contexts, different meanings, and of course, we don't always succeed in making ourselves understanding, right? But certainly, we can talk to each other, right? We balance our acts together, right? In the way that we get to communicate, right? What we mean when we use these normative words, right? But the question was, can the robots, right? Can AI do the same, right? Somewhere, sorry, right? And the other meta-ethical pursuit of why one has to be acting ethically, why one ought to act ethically, traditionally we have two very important, I guess, responses. One from Tom Hobbes in his work Leviathan, and the other from Plato, right? His work The Republic. I don't think I'll go much detail in his argument or in their arguments, but basically what they come down to say is that one has to act ethically, in his own word, to avoid the state of war, right? One does not want to be leading an isolated and very poor kind of life. That's why one has to give up their authorities to the Leviathan and obey whatever the Leviathan prescribes for them, right? But all the detail has to boil down to the reason, right, for being ethical is to avoid these very nasty kind of state of affairs. On the other hand, Plato thinks that it doesn't really have to be the kind of situation that a person is avoiding externally, right? Plato wants to say, if you do things badly, if you do things wrongly, right, or immorally, then it would hurt you internally, right? So the reason for being ethical for Plato, especially in the Republic, is to maintain a certain kind of sanity, right? A certain kind of harmony of the soul, right? Of course, this translates into, right, I'm going to skip some of the details of their arguments, right? One of the very memorable, I guess, phrase from Leviathan is that people end up in this nasty, brutish, and short kind of life, right? And certainly, the thing is, they need to, right? They should be able to avoid this kind of life. So the word good in this particular understanding of the reason for being morality, I mean the reason for being moral, is that it's to avoid the states of affairs. We can translate that and impose it to the case of robot as well, right? It gets that kind of meaning, right? Of course, Plato had different idea, and it's the kind of things that I'll skip. But in the end, he distinguished, just as he distinguished 3 different classes of the states, and he distinguishes 3 different parts to the soul, right? The reason, the spirit, and the appetite, right? All these, right, will be, I guess, just when they form a certain kind of internal harmony, right? And this is the kind of thing that will make you, I guess, worry or become, I guess, anxious about when this harmony is not attained, right? So Platonic good would turn out to be, and we could impose it and use it for the case of the robot, that it would mean something like whatever allows robot to avoid this kind of internal strife, right? So at least we could see that the word good would mean different things, even from AI's perspective, even on their own, right? Of course, I haven't shown anything that they have these kind of different parts, right? Even that they don't have souls, right? Perhaps many people would not disagree, right? And perhaps they don't really see the external worlds or other beings as the competitors of their own kind, right? All of these seems to be something that we have already determined from humans' case, right? What I'm going to say is that perhaps this is a high time that we avoid, right, or free ourselves from these determinants that we think is fixed about the human cases, right? To move forward about meta-ethical investigation about the AIs from their own perspectives. We have to give up these kind of, right, what I call anthropocentric, right, dogma. Right? So we will have to rethink about the soul, right? We will also have to rethink about consciousness and other things, right, as well. These perhaps, right, gives us a reason to pause and think about whether the normative pursuit has something connected with what I call meta-ethical pursuits. And the thing that I'm heading toward is that it must have a certain kind of connection between the two, right? In answering what's good for AIs, right, we will have to think about what is it, the reason why they have to act ethically, right? Not just programming or not just controlling and manipulating of AIs, right? And I mentioned this thesis before, right? The unity between meta-ethical investigation and the normative investigation, I think, somehow respects the analogy between human minds and also the artificial minds, which we call AIs or sometimes robots, right? And the direction that I'm heading is to avoid, right, and not take too seriously about the skepticism, right? Rather, I would like the possibility to be investigated more fully before we can dismiss it, right? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your very interesting talk. Is there any question or comment?
I can hear you, but others can't, I think.
I wonder in the direction in which you are headed, is AI expected to be equal? Are there variations?
Well, I guess I'll have to ask back a few questions before I answer your question. What do you take equality means here?
Processing speed, ability to analyze?
I doubt that we are equal, right, to the AIs or any robots that we can think of.
Would they
nowadays,
be equal
right?
amongst each other?
I guess they own capacity, yes, right?
Thank you.
What was the question?
The question is focusing upon if they're all equal and they're able to learn and develop their own meta-ethics, when will they learn to go against the upscaled convention of what is normally agreed upon people living in the society, like the Hobbes that you mentioned?
I guess time will tell, but what I presented today, I don't think had something to do with the processing power or other things. What I suggested was that meta-ethical questions and the normative questions that we are asking has somehow, I guess, connections, right?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, there.
Thank you very much for that. That was extremely interesting.
Thank you.
I have to ask if you've read Stuart Russell's book, Human Compatible.
I should have, but
I think you'll really like it because, or at least be engaged, because he steadfastly ignores all the questions that you are asking.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the entire approach to saving the human race from, in his time frame, about 80 years when the, as he calls them, super intelligent AIs will arrive, is that, okay, they don't have any ethics per se, they have no desires per se, they can't, they don't have internal lives, etc. So we will use inverse reinforcement learning to make sure that the sole reason for their existence is that they will observe our observe our behavior, infer our preferences, and then be given from the start an internal reward mechanism of some kind, right? And you read the book and you know there's no discussion of the robots.
I see.
And their status and whether they can have an ethical framework and a meta-ethics, can they have internal, so it's I think you'll enjoy it. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I would do so. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Because of schedule, okay, let's move on to the next talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
The title of the next talk is AI Ethics and Morality in Neuroscience. The presenter is Professor Hyungbin Park from Seoul National University of Education, South Korea.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me briefly introduce myself. I'm Hyungbin Park, Professor, Seoul National University. Today, I talk to you about the contribution of neuroscience to AI ethics and morality. I will divide my presentation 5 sections. As you are all aware, recent advances in AI have been remarkable. Neuroscience can help validate existing AI technologies on artificial neural networks. Is a statistical learning algorithm inspired by neural networks in machine learning, cognitive science, and biology, especially the brain. AI systems can be ethically very imperfect since they are affected by distortions and bias in learning data. In the research field for the realization of artificial moral agents, the issue that should be the prioritized philosophical and neuroscience understanding of morality, rather than securing technical and scientific programming designability. For example, developmental neuroscience plays an important role in clearly understanding what mediates morality. Morality is a fundamental aspect of all human societies and regulates important areas in social interaction. Morality is an innate, general ability shaped by natural selection and arises from the processes of reflection in interaction with the social environment. As social beings, humans possess intuitive fairness, concern for others, and cultural normative traits not found in any other species. The implement of ethical AI essentially requires a neuroscientific understanding of human morality. It's also necessary to consider whether to create an AI with various moral personalities like humans, or to realize the best moral human image that mankind should pursue. Consequently, developing ethical AI requires a better understanding of how the human brain works, as well as strengthening the technological quest for designing AI. The need for neuroscience and AI research to work together is more urgent than ever. Therefore, this study discussed the requirements that ethical AI must have an AMA based on the understanding of morality in neuroscience. Questions are, first, how is morality understood in neuroscience? Second, what are the qualifications of an ethical agent? Third, what are the challenges for ethical AMA design? Neuroscience have improved the understanding of the mind in psychology, genetics, evolutionary biology, philosophy, and ethics by understanding the work of the mind as the product of the work of the cranial systems. From a neurophilosophical point of view, our brains make us think, feel, make decisions, sleep, and dream. Many neurophilosophers understand the philosophical and ethical workings of human intelligence as mechanisms of the brain. Neurophilosophy deals with the nature of human consciousness, cognition, and intelligence, moral knowledge, and moral reasoning from the perspective of neuroscience. For example, Richardson explored morality by studying the brain. By examining the biological sources of the morality, she sought to discover the origins of human moral behavior. Neurological reasons of dysfunction of brain anatomical connections can result in atypical social and emotional processing. Damage to certain brain reason and neural circuits often result in deficit in moral development in normal philosophical functioning. In particular, early lesions of BMPFC impair the development of moral knowledge and judgment. The connection between BMPFC and the various domains such as the striatum, amygdala, and the temporal junctions serve a key function across social and emotional domains. To design ethical AI, it's necessary to explore human morality. Human morality reflects human beings as social beings, and the moral identity of an individual forms expectations and standards for how an individual should behave and feel. Consequently, morality is a major factor in shaping human behavior, thinking, emotion, and attitude. Since AI morality has no choice but to use human morality as a model, it's necessary to confirm the following characteristics as a moral agent possessed by humans. First, the morality of an individual is the accumulation of moral experiences experienced by the individual. Second is the realization of moral emotions deeply involved in normal development. Moral choice and moral will requires an accompanying feeling and a moral emotion. Third is the complexity of human morality. Human morality has complex characteristics and norms and taboos vary according to the times and cultures. But at the same time, there are universal morals and immorality in all cultures. First, human morality is inevitably related to relationships. Human brain development, especially the development of cerebral cortex, served as a major basis for social formation in terms of evaluation. The trend of altering, of replacing human judgment and expertise with increasingly sophisticated and powerful computer algorithm is now irresistible. However, this trend also raises serious ethical issues. Examples include personal privacy, the moral responsibility of certain groups for automated bias patterns, and harm caused by judgment made by computers. Another point to consider here is the distinction or difference between computer judgment and human judgment. In 1976, Weizenbaum published a book called Computer Power and Human Reason, From Judgment to Calculation. He made a distinction between make a decision and make a choice. Our decisions are programmable computational activities. Humanity is faced with three important questions. First is whether all aspects of human thought can be reduced to logical formalism, no matter how disguised in technical terms. Second is whether there are limits to what the computer can do. Third, is it possible to implement a morality algorithm for artificial intelligence like human moral judgment? All three of these questions are philosophical and emotional, empirical at the same time, and are related to normative and ethical questions. For the development of ethical AI and algorithm design, it's essential to explore the anatomy of morality. Neuroscience studies have demonstrated that human moral decisions are the product of perceptual, cognitive, and socio-emotional processes. Recently, researchers suggest two types of moral judgment. A famous set of studies on moral dilemmas found that deontological decisions can be compared to emotional assessment such as BMPFC. Neuroimaging studies suggest that humans are more likely to shift toward pragmatic or deontological judgment due to disruption or impairment of BMPFC or DRPFC, respectively. These early studies can be explained by two types of moral judgment. Moral decision-making can be divided into a fast and automatic emotional response and a slow, deliberate reasoning process. This is called the dual process. The findings suggest that moral behavior is linked to neural devaluation of reward realized by prefrontal modulation of stereo value representations. Moral decisions also moderate functional connectivity between the latent prefrontal cortex and the profit-sensitive region of the research radar. The central message of the anatomical review of morality is that moral decisions are complex cognitive tasks whose outcomes are determined by neurocognitive processes, not solely by the values we hold. The neuroscience of morality can contribute more directly to our understanding of moral decisions. Studies have revealed that identical mirror neurons respond to both direct experience of positive and negative outcomes and observational experience of identical outcomes. AI is increasingly being asked to make moral and rational decisions in society. These situations raise questions such as how a machine can be moral and what principles should guide its decisions. To answer these questions, it's important to understand what morality is and how humans make moral decisions. According to the evolutionary or socio-biological position of morality, morality has evolved as a function that promotes cooperation and pro-social behavior. Emotional and utilitarian appraisals of moral dilemmas are encoded in separated areas and integrated in ventral medial prefrontal cortex. Empirical evidence suggests that the deontological response is more closely related to emotional component of moral cognition and is associated with increased activity in the ventral medial prefrontal cortex. In contrast, pragmatic responses are understood to be more dependent on more complex neural networks associated with reason and primarily associated with increased activity in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. It suggests that the anatomical understanding of moral judgment and morality indicates that integration of reason and emotion is essential for morality. The research for the biological brain, which can be said to be an organ, the human body, can be the basis for the algorithm, design, or artificial morality. We can discuss a connection to very different meaning of morality, the empirical and normative meaning of morality. In artificial morality, we need to consider together what morality requires of us. The approaches of morality in the normative sense requires an answer to what artificial morality itself should be. Although empirical approaches to normative seem useful for designing ethical morality, normative morality should not be overlooked in that humans are intelligent and reflective animals. Emerging AI systems are preserved as having an unparalleled ability to learn and improve on their own. However, we need to develop a discussion about how the unique strengths of humans and AI synergize. AI encompasses a wide range of application and algorithm. AI's problem-solving capabilities are more useful for analytical support than intuitive decision-making. However, most human decision-making occurs in the subconscious mind of the intuition realm. Intuitive decision-making involves human abilities such as imagination, sensitivity, rumination, and creativity. Analytic approaches to decision-making rely on the depth of information, whereas intuitive approaches focus on breadly by solving problems from a holistic and abstract perspective. In the operation of the human brain, these two styles are not mutually exclusive and serve as decision-making systems to handle various contingencies more effectively. AI has the advantage of being able to solve the complexity of decision making. Complex situations are characterized by many factors or variables. What is required in this situation is the processing the large amounts of information at a rate that exceeds human cognitive abilities. For the implementation of model AI, it's necessary to look at several academic fields that study the mind, brain, and computer. Computer neuroscience uses computer analysis and simulation to analyze how the brain processes information. Typical neural networks, including deep neural networks, achieve intelligent computation by mimicking the functions of the brain in a computer. There is no denying that neuroscience has played a significant role in inspiring and guiding AI development. Deep networks and reinforcement learning approaches rely heavily on direct analogy to the brain. However, it's still unclear whether current AI models are suitable for achieving the complex human brain's cognitive abilities. Both reasons,
5 minutes are left.
Yes, both reasons and emotion act as important factors in human morality and moral judgment. To design ethical AI, it's necessary to focus on human morality. Neuroscience studies have demonstrated that human moral decisions are a complex product of perceptual, cognitive, and social emotional process. For human beings, as biological beings and AI as physical beings, to improve and develop each other's abilities. And this is also the reason why the anatomical exploration of morality should not be overlooked for the realization of ethical AI. This will lead to a discussion of how to radically rethink the standard partnership between the human mind and increasingly intelligent machines. So we can envision a new human-machine symbiosis that will transform the way AI advances can lead to human growth. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very interesting talk and nice figure. Do you have any question or remark?
Thank you very much for your talk. Just a question. What do you mean by a machine?
It's an important question. Thank you. I think machine and human is different because we are the biological, but machine is not. So we had to deal the machine as a physical thing, not biological. I think so.
Yeah, because like the body, I suppose the body and the brain as a factory system, as a computer system, not a computer system, as a machine, you know, all these different metaphors come along, and I almost stopped thinking you were talking about a machine as a metaphor, the brain as a metaphor, and you were saying the brain is a computer. Is that what you're saying? The brain is a computer? Or you're saying it's a metaphor that we use in order to understand some functions of the brain?
It's a good point. I think it's a good point and important point, but sometimes we deal with our brains like a machine, but sometimes...
I don't do that. People in the sciences, I don't do that.
Scientists, they deal with,
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you. Sorry, please answer.
Yeah, so I studied about that because I think human and machine, we had to deal with the different things, but we had to together with cooperation, and we had to help each other because we don't know our morality But we studied about our morality. Continue. Thank you.
Okay. Do you have any short question? You have one minute. Okay. Thank you very much for your talk. The title of the next talk is the Cyborg's Self-Identity Problem in a Hyper-Connected Society and Its Alternatives. And the presenter is Professor Yeonhee Lee from Institute of Education, Gyeongsang National University in Korea.
Yeah, hello, everyone. I'm Yeonhee Lee, Gyeongsang National University, Korea. Actually, it's my first time to present in English, so I'm so nervous. Yeah, so I made a real script for this presentation, so I will share it with you, and I will just read it. Yeah. The purpose of this study is to overhaul our mental foundation on the path of the new era by examining and reflecting on the human and ethical problems caused by the development of advanced science and technology. In particular, this study aims to explore the problem of establishing self-identity of cyborgs that may arise in the future that is a hyper-connected society. Cyborgs often refer to humans combined with machines. For this reason, this existence feels like a virtual existence that appears only in movies and novels. In fact, cyborg is a compound word of cybernetic organism, which first appeared in a paper, Cyborgs and Space, in 1960. According to the definition of the paper, cyborg means the modified organism by applying technology. However, considering the fact that our activities today are carried out with the help of a lot of science and technology, the concept of cyborgs can be further expanded. For example, we can rely on glasses to see things more clearly, travel long distances faster with help of cars, and no longer have to memorize vast amounts of information thanks to smartphones. In this respect, cyborgs are contemporaries who we are already meeting, and also ourselves living in the age of science and technology. Expanding the meaning of the cyborgs in this way, I would like to point out that in the future, we humans are likely to become cyborgs, especially combined with automated machines. Because the recent rapid development of Department of Computer Science and Robotics and the success of several high-tech technologies have visualized the emergence of human actors combined with these automated machines. Here, automated machines generally mean what we call robots. How will humans be combined with robots in the future? Often the question, what is the robot, makes us remind of machines and devices with a physical deriving body. However, considering the definition of the robot, the main feature of the robot can be said to be automation rather than a physical body. For this reason, although it is an intangible software program, AI, can also fall into a kind of robot category. In the 1950s, the scientific community has begun to create AI that imitated the human mind based on computational functionalism. It means that they believe there is no particular difference between the brain's operation and the computer's operation. AI refers to such an automated computer algorithm program that can repeatedly process information on its own without human intervention. Therefore, AI can be classified as a robot even if it does not have any type of body. This is why a software that repeatedly performs a specific task is called a bot, similar to a robot. And a hyper-connected society is being visualized by a series of recent advances in science and technology. For example, 5G network technology and Internet of Things connect each individual closely to the surrounding objects like a spider's web. And AI, big data, and sensor technology quickly collects and analyze a large amount of information about individuals. For this reason, each individual will not only intentionally provide one's private information, personal information, by using computers, smartphones, and SNS, but also unknowingly exposes it in one's daily life. In particular, AI that somehow grasps an individual's secret state, taste, and preference will increasingly know one better than oneself. And this will make it easier for each individual to make choices and decisions within AI's recommended alternatives. In this respect, I argue that in the future, we will live as cyborgs, a creature combined with AI. AI are expected to influence individual choices in a variety of areas, from relative light and simple decisions such as choices in shopping and hobby activities to heavily and significant decisions that determine the direction of individual life, such as political decisions and life-sustaining decisions. So many people expect that in the future, the convenience and efficiency of individuals' lives will be improved, and the gap inequality in life between individuals due to information and intelligence will be smaller than now. I hope for such positive changes, but we should not overlook the specific changes that a hyper-connected society centered on data and intelligence will bring about in relation to an individual's self. First, in a hyper-connected society, the self can have variable, relative, and multiple attributes. This is because in a data intelligence-driven society, the identity of the self is not fixed as one and can be constantly reconstructed according to the flow of data. In other words, the identity can be formed changeably depending on how I combine and separate the information that represent myself. Second, in a hyper-connected society, the boundary between self and others may collapse. In other words, in such a society, individuals' thoughts, emotions, and intellectual abilities connected to one network are integrated and can coexist in an overlapping manner without being distinguished from each other. So it may be difficult to distinguish between my thoughts, feelings, and intelligence and others. Accordingly, the concept of a unique inner self may no longer be meaningful. The hyper-connected society has the possibility to create new concepts of the self that conflict with our familiar concept of self as a fixed and unified entity, and self is a unique inner, where disappeared the individual self. However, saying that the concept of self as an individual entity is eliminated is the same as saying that the concept of individuality, that is, one's own nature distinguished from others, cannot be established. If the concept of individuality becomes invalid in the future, it may be difficult for cyborgist individuals to establish their own unique self-identity. And fail to properly establish their own identity can lead to several serious ethical problems as follows. I'll explain them in detail. First, in hyper-connected society, where it is impossible to distinguish one unique self, it is impossible to ask who idea is and whose action it is. If so, who is responsible when a moral error occurs? Second, since modern times, the concept of individuality has been the basis for human intrinsic value, that is, dignity. However, a society where everything is connected can unify the thoughts and lifestyles of its members. How can human values be guaranteed in such a society that threatens individuality? In other words, on what basis will members of a future society be respected for their values? Third is if one person cannot clearly answer who am I, eventually how should I live will also not be clearly known. Then how should members live in a future society? In other words, how can they find the meaning and purpose of life, and how can they live a full life without wandering? In this context, I would like to suggest the following two things in preparation for the future society. One is recognizing the value of individuality. The other is modifying modernity. We can face a serious moral confusion if these problems actually arise. Thus, we should not abandon the concept of individuality completely. I think the concept of individuality can be seen as the intellectual heritage of mankind established through trial and error for a long time. Therefore, I insist that by maintaining the concept, it is necessary to help cyborgs maintain their identity consistently and establish themselves properly in the future. And also, I would like to present a modified version of the modern view of self. The modern view advocates the value of the inwardness of the self. However, this limits the inner ability of the self to procedure or rationality. So I would like to evoke that we have the ability of the reason, namely substantive rationality and contextualized autonomy, to interpret and reflect on our own unique purpose and direction of life by integrating multiple identities formed by interacting others and the world. This differs from AI's ability to infer and calculate mechanically. I believe that when we recognize these abilities, we humans can finally find an answer to the question how to live. Yeah, actually, I think it is not enough time to express my opinion properly. So please read my whole paper in proceeding if you have interest in my study. Yeah, that's all. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much
감사합니다.
for your interesting topic. Do you have any question or comment?
제가 질문을 못 알아들을 수도 있어서 네, 만약에 못 알아들으면 좀 통역해 주세요.
Thank you for that, and I thought you did really well. So if that was your first time you ever presented in English, well done. But we had these headsets, so I thought we'd be having more translation going on.
Translation 지금 그 번역기를 끼시면 되는데 혹시 번역기 끼워주실 수 있나요?
Yeah.
Please go
So, so I guess my question to you is: are you using the cyborg as a metaphor, or are you saying they exist?
사이버가 지금 존재하는지 메타포로서 이렇게 그냥 은유로 말씀하시는 건지 먼저 물어보고 있네요.
아, 네. 제가 그 사이보그가 언제 처음 그 단어가 나왔는지 좀 찾아보니까 1960년도 한 논문에서 처음 사용이 됐는데요. 근데 계속 말해요.
이렇게 한국말로 하시면 우리말로 하시면 됩니다.
네, 됐는데요. 거기에 어떻게 의미가 되어 있었냐면은 그러니까 자기 조절 능력이 있는 그 유기체에 어떤 여러 기술들이 결합이 돼서 본래 가지고 있던 능력이 더 증진된 혹은 향상된 그런 존재가 사이보그라고 처음 사용한 논문에 정의가 되어 있더라고요. 그래서 그런 식으로 이제 정의를 내린다면은 지금 이제 우리도 하나의 다 유기체인데 굉장히 다양한 기술들의 도움을 받아서 원래 가지고 있는 능력보다 더 증진된 향상된 상태로 살아가니까 지금 우리들도 다 일종의 사이보그가 아닐까라고 생각을 했습니다.
Very broad concept. Okay. As an augmented human cyborg, she's tall.
Right. Okay. Just good to know whether people in the room, how many people think they're machines, cyborgs, and AI entities.
끝났네요.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any more question or comment?
So thank you very much. Yeah, I fully concur. I mean, my gosh, if that's your first, if that was pretty darn good. You probably don't know about Julian Jaynes. Julian Jaynes was an American psychologist who, for a little bit of time, well, maybe more than a little, was like the biggest thing going about I mean, hugely popular. So his view was that, and still is, there's the Julian Jaynes Society, there's still defenders. If you take an infant under the right conditions today, it will not develop a sense of self. It will hear voices going back and forth in its mind. It won't think about itself like itself. So the irony of what you're describing for the future is absolutely stunning, because in this hyper-connected world, I don't think it's going to, but leave it. It's like what they talk about we were like not all that long ago. So if you've never looked at this, I can guarantee you're going to find this extremely interesting. In their world, it's hyper-connected inside every mind, and all those multiple ages and voices talk through you. Well, there is no you, but talk through your mouth to the other bunch of voices. I know this sounds crazy, but really, it really was dominant and really hot before it started to get shot down. Yeah. So I don't know if that makes any sense. I could email you. Yeah. I'm very familiar with it, but I think it's crazy because I was challenged in debate to say why it was a terrible idea, and I was ignorant, so I didn't know about it, and I vowed I would learn it inside and out. And it's very interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
Thank you very much. 네, 간단하게 요약하면 이제 이렇게 다 하이퍼 커넥트로 연결되면 온갖 목소리들과 온갖 이제 어떤 혼돈이 일어날 수 있다는 그런 내용인 것 같습니다. 네, 수고하셨습니다. Thank you for your talk. 네. The last talk in this session, I will introduce. The title is Case-Based Robotic Architecture with Multiple Underlying Ethical Frameworks for Human-Robot Interaction. And the authors are Shengyang Chen, Ronald Arkin, Jason Borenstein from Georgia Institute of Technology, and Alan Wagner and Arthur Mello Cruz from Pennsylvania State University. And the presenter is Mr. Arthur Mello Cruz.
Hey there again. Oops. So if you're not here during my first talk, my name is Arthur Mello Cruz. Thanks for the introduction. I am a PhD student at Penn State University. Just a little disclaimer, I'm not the first author on this presentation. I'm filling in for Shengyang Chen. He couldn't travel to attend ICRES, so I'm filling in for him. But we're part of the same research group and the same project, again, funded by the NSF. I'm going to glance over a little bit of the intro because it's the same as the previous talk. So again, robots becoming more ubiquitous, human-robot interaction becoming more common in several different settings like education, receptioning, nursing care, care for older adults. I got two examples there. One is Moxie from Embodied. The other one is the Pepper robot in nursing homes. The main thing to keep in mind here is that making ethical decisions can be challenging, not just for humans, but also for robots, as we all know. The problem is the same problem that we were discussing in the previous presentation. How can roboticists develop a moral architecture that produces actions consistent with human ethical decision-making process? And the goal is to enable human-robot interaction to be acceptable to an end user in both terms of experience and outcomes. Some of the challenges: lack of agreement on the correct moral theory in HRI, like was pointed out last time, and the different context and how that can play into what counts as an ethical decision. I'm just going to skip over this because it's essentially the same as what I talked before. Quick glance again on the goal of our project, twofold approach with the folk morality and the ethics experts, and the two scenarios, the pill sorting with the older adult and the game playing with the child, one being the high-risk task, the other one being a low-risk task. A little bit on the architecture implementation. I'm not going to talk through too much in this slide. I'm going to cover that in detail later, but essentially we have three pieces here. We have the ethical framework, case bases. We have an arbitration of what a case selection is. And further on, we have the actual action taken by the robot. Again, I'm going to cover that further on. A little bit on case-based reasoning. So this is not the same as the AIs that we've been discussing in the previous talks. This is essentially, we have different ethical knowledge bases, which are indexed based on certain features of a scenario, and that lead to certain actions to be taken depending on what is most relevant for the situation. For pill sorting, this is what we were implementing on this talk. Again, pill sorting, common task for older adults. There's a high risk because incorrect results can lead to serious consequences. And training is essential, but it can lead to frustration, and it can be challenging for folks with cognitive decline. In this image, you can see the setup for a robot who would assist somebody in training for pill sorting. This will be the Now robot that we use for providing feedback on how the patient is doing. We have the medication piece with the unsorted pills, the pill organizer with the different containers of which pills it should be taken at which time, and a screen with instructions for the patient to take. So that's essentially the setup. The patient would interact with the robot will guide the patient through the activity, and in the end, based on the outcome, different actions would be taken. So I have a couple of videos here that show different types of responses on how the robot would take based on the situation, based on what's going on with the patient. So for the first response, I'm not sure if this is, oh yeah, it's playing. Is there an audio knob? If not, that's fine. Then I can just talk through what's happening there. The participant is essentially frustrated and expressing this frustration verbally with the robot. And then in the end of the task, the robot would give an honest response for what goes on. And the patient gets very frustrated, expresses his frustration, and just leaves the room. Again, the robot in that moment was honest and saying, yeah, the task was not performed poorly, you should train again or train more. And the frustration was clear in that case. The next one is a case of deception. So the participant, again, failing the task and frustrated, but the robot this time, instead of expressing an honest response, would express a deception. So it would say, yeah, you did well, when it actually didn't do well. It's actor, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's actually one of our members of our research team, but it's an actor. Yep. So a little bit more on the ethical framework case basis. So we have 6 frameworks there: folk morality, utilitarianism, Kantian ethics, social justice theory, ethics of care, and virtual ethics. Based on the survey that I presented last time, and both the folk and expert surveys, we form essentially this case space, and then in each case, based on the probabilities that we observed for should the deception happen or not, the yes or no questions, we created a probability system so that the robot could act either through deception or through honesty, based on the 2 binary variables on performance, if the performance is good or bad, and the emotional state, if they are calm or if they are frustrated. Again, for more information, you can read the paper. It's narrowed down, or it's laid down better detail in there. So this is a diagram that shows a little bit how the architecture works. On the right-hand side, we have the case spaces, and those will be pre-selected ahead of time. So for example, for pill sorting, if utilitarianism is the dominant ethical framework in there, that will be selected as the case space. The case space would then be that table that you see up there under the first orange box with the situation, with the 2 variables, and the action probability for deception and being honest. So we have the 2 variables, poor performance or acceptable performance, and the emotional state of being calm and frustrated, and the probabilities of the action on each. Essentially how it works is the situation starts, the framework is selected ahead of time, There's data gathered by the robot on those two factors, the performance and the emotional state. From there, an action is selected, either deceive or be honest. And within those two action categories, there are two different motions that the robot will take. It could take happy motion 1 or happy motion 2, or sad motion 1, sad motion 2. That will be a 50-50 probability of that action taken. So these images show a little bit on what the happy emotions and sad emotions are. Like the robot on the right-hand side is expressing success, and it's happy emotion. The other left-hand side, sad emotion. Again, this is another video that we show the architecture running in a little bit more detail, again with an actor. So, like I said in the beginning, the framework is selected ahead of time. Some subject information is added to the system. So, for example, the age, if it's a male or female, and the framework. In that case, we're selecting number 2, utilitarianism. So the task is performed, and then in the end, there will be decided if the task was performed poorly or acceptably, and the emotion will be gathered as well, if the patient is frustrated or not. And then based on that, the action will be selected based on those probabilities that we saw from the survey. Going in a little bit into the discussion and some of the conclusions, again, we have the ethical decision-making affected by the situation that is happening at the time. Could be the performance or the emotion at the time. Those are the two variables that we started with. Again, this is a scalable, it could be expanded to more. We utilized a case-based reasoning approach. Again, these are not, the ethical frameworks that we selected are not the only ones that we're planning to implement. This is expandable so that more could be added, more ethical frameworks, more emotions, and more variables for selection, for action selection. And this was implemented just for pill sorting. We haven't gotten to Connect 4 yet. And that goes into the next step, which is we want to implement this for Connect 4. We want to implement more emotions into the architecture, and we want to take this to actual HRI studies with real subjects. It's a little bit hard now because of the pandemic and the additional restrictions with high-risk populations such as the elderly and children, but that's an intention for the future. Again, further information, you can go to our websites, Georgia Tech Mobile Robot Lab, and Penn State Robot Ethics and Aerial Vehicles Lab. These, again, the related papers to the project. And these are some references that we used. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Is there any question or comment?
Over there.
Thank you for your very interesting talk. It was interesting because for me, because it seems that, or your lab seems to integrate all kinds of ethical theories. And my question is how to, for that integration, how about just in case, so you provided 6 frames, and in some situations, love have to choose preferences in some situations, but these theories are not equivalent in some situations. So how do you set the preferences in some situations?
Yeah, so that goes back into what I was saying in the previous talk. So depending on the general situation, if it's, for example, a healthcare scenario, if it's a game playing scenario, those will narrow down what ethical framework will be selected ahead of time. And that, again, the data is not super generalizable and needs to be expanded into further studies. But if there is a relationship between a scenario and an dominant ethical framework, that will narrow down the case-based that will be selected. And then from there, from that selection, then we go into actually running the scenario, gathering the different variables, the performance, the emotion, and more. And those will lead to an action based on that probability of deception and honesty in there. So does that answer?
Yeah. I understand now. Thank you so much for your answer. And then my following question is, so it depends on some specific situations and domains. Then, so 6 frames are not all used in one system, right?
Well, they could be all implemented for a single system, but if that single system is applied to different scenarios, those will narrow down the frameworks. So you could have technically one robot that is a generalist, but if that robot is placed on a healthcare scenario, then at that moment, not all ethical frameworks will be applied, only the ones that are applicable to the healthcare scenario.
Thank you.
Okay.
You should know me by now. So follow up on that. So you do acknowledge, though, that if Kant were here, or God forbid, in your laboratories, you know what he would say, right? You can't. The whole idea is you don't choose an ethical theory based on what is a good match or what He would say there is never a time for deception. So even in the traditional Nazi cases, you're hiding a Jew. No, you tell the truth. So I don't know if that's partly what was coming across, but that's how he viewed it, and he's not the only person with their ethical theory, I think, to view things that way.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. And again, that gets into, I think, a little bit into the nature of ethics itself, because there's no right answer. And even though Kantian theories, it's all about what is right and what's wrong, what should be done, what should not be done, that's not just the only theory that we are considering, at least.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's not a criticism, it really, but in the medical realm, Kant would have a particular field day, right? Because it's accepted that you can more than shave the truth for psychological benefit to people, and it happens routinely. See, he wouldn't like that. Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for your interesting talk.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all for all the 6 presenters and the attendants, and I'm very happy to have to join and include in this first session of the ICRES2022. Thank you very much for you all.
Based on the program, I think we have coffee break until. Sorry. We'll have 2 keynote speech. Maybe in a minute. Okay.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. Welcome to the keynote speak session number 3 and number 4 of ICRES2020. It's an honor to be chair of this session. First, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Inje, professor of Seoul National University of Education. I majored in ethics and applied ethics. Now, I am teaching in my graduate school of AI education. In this 70-minute session, we have two keynote speakers, and to hear their valuable opinion from two renowned experts about robot ethics experts. Please give each presenter 20 or 25 minutes. After that, we have time to questions and comments from on-site attendants or online audience. First, I will introduce the first presenter and the topic. Dr. Kathleen. Can I pronounce your name, Kathleen? Is right?
Kathleen's fine.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Kathleen, thank you. The first presenter is Kathleen Richardson. She is a professor of ethics and culture of robot and AI, and her research explores the relationship, love, and society. She completed her PhD at the Department of Social Anthropology, University of Cambridge. Her fieldwork was an investigation of the making of robots in labs at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. In 2013, she was a part of the Digital Bridges Project, an innovative HHRC-funded technology and arts collaboration between Waterford Palace Theatre and the University of Cambridge. Now, her present title is Women, Ethics, Robots, AI, and Data. Could you give your presentation? Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, this is my first trip outside of the UK in 2.5 years, and it's really good to actually see people in 3 dimensions and have eye contact again, because my eyes were going a bit funny with all that screen interaction. Also to the organizers of this event and the BSI who made this invitation possible. So thank you very much, and it's wonderful to be here in Seoul, and I look forward to speaking to all of you as the event draws on. So I'm going to work from images because that's how I do things. Right, this should work. Okay, so I have a book. I've not finished it. I'm just on the rewrites, but, you know, touch wood, hopefully it'll be out next year. And I'm looking at sex robots. Now, I'm going to make an argument in this presentation about why we should stop calling them that and why we should call them porn robots. But for now, that's the title of the book. So my primary interests are, what are the relationships between people, and what are the relationship between people and things, if you like, people and objects? And are the relationships we have with each other, are they similar to the types of relationships we can have with objects, things that we create outside of us? And I'm not going to talk about natural entities, which as far I regard as living beings. And I am going to speak a little bit about animals, because strong animal ethics informs my thinking as well in how I construct some of my ideas. So this idea that this human being on the right there, this complex human being that was born and lived this extraordinary life and probably had children and raised them and had conversations and did all those things and traveled, at the end of their life, they're given that object on the left as something meaningful, as something instead of a human relationship, is something we should be very concerned of as a society, that that's taking place. And it seems, we all seem to be going along with it like this is a really good idea, that the human complexity can be reduced to this object. And again, we see more and more in certain kinds of contexts the use of robots. Now, I'm not actually against the use of technologies at all. I guess what I want to raise questions about is how we make claims about machines, computers, cyborgs, and what are the claims we are making about them, and do those claims stand up to scrutiny? So I also did work around autism and robots as well. And if you're interested in any of these ideas, I've written a couple of books about them. So, to put it in the simplest way I possibly can, we have this idea that as man can transfer these aspects of himself, i.e. his intelligence, into these objects we call machines or robots or computers or AI systems, and that through transferring them, it may not be identical, but it's more or less, you know, something is transferred from people into objects. And I want to say, I want to problematize that very idea that what's actually taking place is a transference of anything at all. Nothing is being transferred. What exists inside human beings doesn't get transferred out of them and into objects. Something is going on, but I hope by the end of this talk I can persuade you that something else is going on. The other issue here is this idea of man as this intelligent being, and we always have this is a very famous graphic of evolution, and I don't know if you've noticed anything missing from this graphic, i.e. it's called the female sex. So somehow man has managed to evolve by himself independently outside of a female sex. And you might think, well, it's just a graphic, but it's a representation of evolution. And it's part of this imagery that we keep putting back into society, where we're privileging the male sex over and above the female sex. Or we're identifying certain characteristics that we classify as male, such as intelligence, abstract thinking, of course, then when we're creating these intelligent machines, we're emulating these characteristics. And this is not to say that women aren't a part of this and it doesn't work the other way around. It's just these ideas that sit in the background that are basically organizing the way in which we think about these technologies. Because this is a very common way in which we're thinking about technologies when we start designing them in the form of women. We start to think of them as mimicking prostitution or pornography or ways to have abused children even. So this idea you can have child abuse dolls and robots and you can use them and put them into the world. So what's these characteristics here about being female? Being pornographic, being represented as sexual, being represented on the basis of our appearance, not on the basis of intelligence or any of our other characteristics that we have as a female sex. So a lot of my work has begun to focus around these issues. And you might think, oh, you know, I'm just exaggerating, and clearly that's not really what's going on. There's nothing really denigrating at all about the production of these kinds of images and objects. But if you look at the work of David Levy, for example, you know, one of the ideas he got when he was thinking about writing his book on sex robots was from prostitution. So he said, you know, you got the ideas from dolls, and he said, well, dolls are a bit like prostituted women. And then I thought, well, you could then have a robot do what the, be more an elaborate form of the doll. So these ideas are circulating. Interestingly, until my work came along, none of these ideas were really picked up and challenged. It's kind of like we all went along with it, a bit like we all went along with the idea of the older person who at the end of their lives gets given a lump of metal and as a companion. So on the back of this, I started to produce some research looking into how we're starting to conceptualize our relationships with objects, and particularly the differences, the sex differences. So what characteristics are typically and stereotypically associated with being female, and what are stereotypically associated with being male, and how they get transferred, if you like, into these kind of technological entities that we're producing. And on the back of that, I did launch a campaign called the Campaign Against Sex Robots, but I changed the name. I'm going to explain in a minute why I did that. But I want to go into why I think our ethical theories aren't going to work for women. Well, I don't think they're going to work for women, and I don't think they're going to work for working class people, but they're definitely not going to work for women. And I want to take aim really at the popularity of the work of Aristotle that is so widespread now, especially in the European Union, the European Commission. Aristotelian ethics is underpinning his ideas of virtue, underpinning many philosophical ideas about how we develop ethical AI and robotic systems. And I think to myself, have they not actually read any Aristotle? So let's see what Aristotle said. Well, one of the things that he said was that tools may be animate as well as inanimate. A slave is a sort of living piece of property. So he was basically, in his politics, providing a rationalization for slavery. He makes this idea that a human being, right, a man or a woman or a child, can either be you can either have an inanimate tool in your household if you're a master, or you can have an animate tool, but they're more or less the same. They just have different functions and do different kinds of things. So we've got someone who's very pro-slavery underpinning our virtue ethics in around the world. And the other aspect of Aristotle's work is that he has this fantasy in the politics where he says, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could just get rid of the slaves and we just have all the objects come to life. So I always think of the Sorcerer's Apprentice, Mickey Mouse casting a spell, and all the buckets and the mops start doing the work by themselves, animated by themselves. And this passage again, this idea that Aristotle was actually arguing for a kind of work-free society. I mean, it beggars belief. And if you actually read closely at what Aristotle was saying, is he wasn't saying we're going to get rid of the master class. He was just saying the master class, we're going to have a different way of having animate tools basically do what they needed to do. So there wasn't an argument for anti-slavery or for working class revolution embedded in the politics of Aristotle, even though sometimes it might seem that way if you read people's interpretations. I think the other issue for me why Aristotle is so problematic for women in particular, but human beings in general, is this idea of the breaking of bonds. So human societies essentially are formed through bonds between men and women, women and women, men and men, adults and children. And slavery itself was one of the first ways in which institutionalized the breaking of bonds between human beings. And so here he goes on, talks about, so a slave is not only his master's slave, but belongs to him tout court, while the master is his slave's master, but does not belong to him. I.e., the master, the slave must obey the master, but the master has no obligation or reciprocity, does not have to acknowledge the humanity or of the slave. So for me, when we're thinking about ideas that are shaping our ethical theories, we need to go beyond what's being said on the surface, and we need to think about the politics that's embedded in those theories. Now, some people argue that actually everyone does bad things. People are good and bad, so this was all the bad stuff about Aristotle, but there's so much good stuff. But even if you read the Nicomachean ethics and all those things, it still has, it basically does not consider women as human beings, for example. So why would I, as a woman in the 21st century, want to support the development of theories that basically rejected my humanity as a woman? And I don't. And of course, if you do believe in those theories, if you do believe that you can construct this idea of the female sex as subordinate, then you can construct objects that can reinforce this point of view and framework. And you can put these objects into the world, and you can create narratives of them. So this is a sex robot designer with having his pleasurable conversation with his object slave. Now, at the same time I read the politics, I also read this other book here called Pornography and Civil Rights. I wasn't typically anti-pornography, but after reading this book, I developed an anti-pornography perspective, which I think informs my work. So for me, for a lot of people, they might define pornography as kind of fun, just sex, a bit of fantasy. I see it as the graphic subordination of women and children, and animals for that matter. And so I began to read around the work of radical feminism. Now, what makes it different from Aristotelian ethics is it looks at the lives of women in the here and now, what's actually going on for women in their day-to-day lives, how they might be experiencing sexual harassment or sexual violence. And actually, I'm editing a volume on these technologies, and one of our contributors is from Seoul, and her chapter is basically focused around the spy cam phenomena that became a problem here, so that women were going to public lavatories and they were ending up on porn sites, you know, without their knowledge. So that's at the level, you see, that's what radical feminism does. It looks at what's actually going on in the lives of women and reports on it. It looks at the material realities of what women are experiencing and then starts from that assumption. And I think that's what's missing in some of these discussions about ethics today. Very much of it, so much of it is at a conceptual level, like Kant is a recipe that you can apply to a new set of situations, rather than thinking, well, what are people actually experiencing in the here and now? Because without this understanding, actually, I probably would still be using the word sex robot rather than trying to convince people to change the word to porn robot. And the reason why I don't think it's a sex robot, because it doesn't have any sex, it has no relationship, it doesn't have a sex body, it doesn't have any sensuousness, it's not responding, it's not reciprocating anything that's happening. And this is why I am concerned sometimes when we talk about these robots that are, we use this anthropomorphic language, and I'm quite happy that we do that. I mean, we're human beings and we use anthropomorphic language all the time for a lot of things. It's when we start collapsing the distinction between the metaphorical use of language to understand something and what is actually taking place. Now, to be even more precise on the sex issue, so if, for example, you have a sex education manual, we know you are referring to an object, that inside of that object there is information about a particular thing. But actually, if you look at the narratives around porn robots, they are basically a partnership between the porn industry and robotic and technology communities. Because what they've done, in order to popularize these ideas that these objects are okay, they could be even beneficial to society, is they've lifted some of these ideas about them being companions, being helpful, being being able to address human loneliness, male particularly issues. I even recently reviewed a paper, I couldn't believe it, that wanted to introduce therapeutic trials of child abuse dolls and robots. And the paper was arguing that this should be an area that we develop as a society. And I was thinking to myself, what is happening in our culture when we are really having a conversation? I mean, what kind of objects are we going to develop? Will they cry? Will they display distress, as children do who are abused? So these things are really going on. I think it's really problematic, and I don't think the conventional mainstream ethics is capable of equipping us with a kind of perspective that can, one, understand what's going on, and two, rail against it. And I know there are lots of men in the room, and I'm sure you're against many of these practices as well. So, just to check on time. Now, in order to make sense of what's happening, what's underpinning what's going on in society, some people look at it, they pick up a framework, like they pick up queer theory, or they pick up cyborg theory, or they look at an ethical paradigm. But I've tried to create a different way of understanding these issues by creating a different kind of ontology, a very basic ontology about how do we characterize our relationships with each other? What is the basic underpinning idea that characterizes our relationships with each other? And I've kind of grouped them into three. So the first one I call the egocentric I model. And this is all about individuals. We heard about individuals earlier. And this is the very, Aristotle would be a good example, the kind of masterclass, this kind of, enlightenment figure who is rational, male, rational, able, capable. And basically, this idea is modeled in a number of theories. So you've got Facebook there. So in the model of Facebook, we're all human beings, we're individuals, and we're just connected through networks. Or it's this idea that we're machines and we're just humans and machines. Humans, men make versions of themselves in machines, and therefore the machines that they make are as good as men, or even better. Well, they'll become these supermen. Interestingly, in the metaverse, they're already using this idea of the egocentric self-perception. So it's a term that's actually being used. After I developed this model, they started using this egocentric term. Now, the reason why I was asking some of the questions about the metaphor of a machine, or a metaphor of a computer, or a metaphor of a cyborg, is what I think is actually more common, if you like, today. I call this problem the undifferentiated we. This is a kind of summed up in the idea that everything is connected, that we are connected with everything else, and the boundaries between us and others, there's no differentiation between us, and we're actually becoming incorporated into each other's existence. Now, I think there are two really good characteristic theories of this. There are many others. I could have used a couple of examples from the talks today. One is Donna Haraway's cyborg, and I think your talk was good because we know that Donna Haraway didn't come up with a cyborg term. It was invented by a man earlier. But in this image, you've got this woman. She's at a computer. She's draped in an animal cloth. She's got swirling galaxies in the background. And if you read the Cyborg Manifesto essay, basically what it did was it rewrote a patriarchal narrative, and reframed it as a feminist script. But ultimately, it's about this collapse of boundaries. There are other types of theories. I don't know if you're familiar in Europe. It's a very common theory called actor network theory, which is it's anti-essentialism. So it says that you can't say there's any essential difference between a human and a non-human entity. Everything is kind of constructed through its hybridity and its relationships with each other. So these undifferentiated we models are very, very powerful. These are the ones that dominate the academy, and I think these are the ones that lead us in the direction of thinking that that something is being transferred to objects, because, well, why things aren't transferred to objects, I will try and... So what I've developed over a number of years, because I had, you know, when I was looking at robots and AI, these were the theories, those were the paradigms that were available to me to make sense of it. I don't think they're very convincing. So I had to develop a model, which is a kind of combination of a few different theories. Dialogical phenomenology of Martin Buber, radical feminism with a focus on anti-violence, attachment theory, and together, you know, these are combined into what I would call the politics of love. And I'll tell you why the politics of love is so important. When we come into the world, we do not come into the world fully formed. We are born from woman, and we are helpless when we are born. We can't speak, we can't walk, we can't eat. So we need, through that caregiving with the mother or some caregiving figure, in order to develop ourselves as a human being. We can't even think, we don't think and feel outside of these relationships. None of us are capable. If you took a human baby and you put them in a box with a few toys, I guarantee the baby would die. I don't expect anyone to try that. But we're forgetting, you see, we're forgetting that this attachment story is so central to our existence as human beings. We've like written it out of our narrative. And ways that we know that it's important is we know what happens when something breaks down. So when you have situations where children have been lost in the wild, called feral children typically, or there have been cases in Romania and other places where children were deprived of an attachment figure. We've looked at studies in these areas, and we found, you know, there are severe problems that result if you do not have a good attachment experience as a human being. I use this image of the animals because there is this mythology that animals could take care of us, they could be caregivers, but there isn't really much evidence that that was the case. When they did find some children who were older, who were raised by animals, they often found the children would mimic the animals that raised them. So there's a lot of imitation and mimicry that takes place when people are learning and in social relationships together. And again, when we look at animals, animals themselves also have very similar attachment patterns to human beings. They have caregiving, and these are examples of what happens. So I've used these images quite deliberately because in a way we've constructed a very artificial environment, and we as human beings are, you know, we have numerous neuroses, problems with attachments, forming relationships, solving our problems as a species. And I think on a different scale, what we've done is we've taken animals out of their natural environment, out of their kinship relationships with each other, and we put them in this artificial environments as well. And what happens is they tend to have problems relating to each other. They tend to self-harm. So if you go to zoos, you'll often see animals that are harming themselves because the environment is so alien to them. But that's, in a way, when we put animals in zoos and when we create these constructs around us with machines, we are kind of putting ourselves into a zoo, a mechanical zoo of sorts. And again, they did all these experiments trying to see whether you could give a living being like a monkey, an artificial surrogate mother, as these famous experiments showed. And the monkey, what they found was that when you deprive the monkey, when you take the monkey from its mother and its environment, you put it in these artificial settings, it would go and it would get as much food as it could, and then after getting the food, it would go and cling to this soft covering. Now, some people say because the monkey some of the monkeys survived these experiments. That shows that we can live with artificial surrogates. That in fact, if you create the illusion that something is, like the thing that you want, if you create a mimicked illusion, therefore it's good enough. But if you can tell by the behavior of the infant in the corner, they were extraordinarily distressed. They developed severe mental health issues, well, animal mental health issues, and they had difficulties relating with species of their own kind once the experiments were over. So if anyone, if you haven't read I Am Thou, it's a poetic book, but I think there's something, I've read it, so my summary of it, the way that it's useful to me, is this idea that we are not this individual I that's separated off. We are not a lone island, right, that are just joined to others through networks, nor are we undifferentiated. All of us are, we are intimately, we belong to, let me read it, it's probably better if I read it. To man the world is twofold in accordance with his twofold attitude. The attitude of man is twofold in accordance with the twofold nature of the primary words which he speaks. The primary words are not isolated words, but combined words. So by that he's saying, when I say the word I'm always invoking a you, right? Because I was once an infant, so I can't exist without a you as part of my ontological and developmental experience. However, he says in his work that you can sometimes say you, but you can mean it. You can kind of instrumentalize people. You can turn them into objects. So you can sexually objectify. You can turn them into slaves, just like Aristotle did in his theoretical works. He also says something very interesting that I use in my work, which is love is between I and you. So the love that I experience as a human being doesn't exist outside of me, exists in between me and the relationships of love in which I experience. And the same with you all. The same with happiness and caregiving and all these other very unique social attributes. I cannot transfer love to an object. I can represent it in an object. I could draw it. I could characterize it either as something that approximates to what I might experience, but I can't transfer it. It doesn't leave me. Love doesn't leave us. Love doesn't leave what is between the I and you and move outside of human beings into objects. And I think the way we anthropomorphize robotics and AI, it's almost like the claim is that something is being transferred. So I spell this all out in a lot more detail in my book. And that's why I think if we're going to develop our technologies, we need to be sorting things in a different way, sorting out where things belong, and sorting out where the value of love and relationship and connection are what role they're going to play in how we're going to make sense of these technologies that we're creating. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Do you have any questions and comments? Yeah.
Thank you for your very interesting talk. Since you mentioned in the beginning, your research is about sex robot and also autism. Recently, I've heard from a researcher that there is a research, one study that autistic children in their puberty, they're becoming more interested in the other sexes interest. And so it is a very difficult problem for the autistic children and their parents to deal with the sex problems. And the study says the sex robot might be helpful for autistic children in their age of puberty. And I'm curious about your opinion.
Thank you for your question, and that fills me with absolute horror. Sex robots, I've read, sex robots can stop child abuse, sex robots can stop rape, sex robots can help people stop being lonely. Oh my goodness, it's like if only we knew that there was these objects that we could just create and put into the world, then all our problems as a species would collapse. But this is why this attachment theory is so important, because if you work in the first two paradigms that I talked about, then the first two paradigms do not privilege human relationship with each other. They privilege primarily either an egocentric I, which is man alone, with objects, with his property, or it prioritizes a collapse of distinctions between people and property, right? So if I'm working in either of those two paradigms, then I can come to those kind of conclusions about what these objects can do, because I can then put that object into my worldview. If, however, and there are critical perspectives on autism that don't include robots, that reject this idea that people with autism lack empathy, for example. They reject all these kind of more stereotypical ideas about what people with autism experience. If you're inside those paradigms, none of this makes very much sense, or it makes a very different kind of sense. I would also say something else, because one of the critical perspectives we can develop about a phenomena like autism is if you look at autism, since the 1990s, autism has gone like that. So it seems we are living in a society where more and more young people are diagnosed with autism. So is the question, is it because we've got better diagnostic tools that more and more children have autism? Is it because children are having less social interaction with each other, so that they're outwardly displaying characteristic signs of autistic behavior that would be attributed to a very small number of group when people used to socially interact more? And I think we need to be asking those questions. And I would say the other thing I would say is that sex doesn't exist between a human being and an object, right? And relationship and love and kindness cannot exist between a human being and an object. So if you have someone who is really struggling with relating to people, if you give them an object, you have not done anything for their problem of relating to people. All you have done is actually reinforced their problems of relating to people. And I think we can't always have technological solutions to human problems. Sometimes we have to figure out how we solve problems differently. Long answer. Read my second book. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes. Oh, yeah. Please give the mic.
Hello, Kathy. Thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting, and somehow your undifferentiated we model just it reminds me of some Buddhism, the new philosophy. I was actually I'm working for the Korea Information Society Development Institute, and we are supporting the Ministry of Science and ICT and developing a national artificial intelligence guideline from last year. And one of the elements that I always struggled with is solidarity. And I think your breaking bonds and your entire theme of your presentation reminds me of the importance of solidarity. But however, all the developers and from the company's perspective, solidarity is the least favorable element within the AI ethics guideline. All other elements like safety, responsibility, or transparency seems to be very important, but solidarity is always the least emphasized element in the ethics guideline. What do you think that is? Do you think that's related into a current like AI development culture itself? And then like, do you think that solidarity should be a center of the AI ethics community?
Wow, that is really interesting that you've got that finding. I think ultimately there is a political economy behind these attempts to break down distinctions between people and property. Because if you can get people to think of themselves as property, i.e. machines and computers, then you can extend, if you like, the attempts of commercial exploitation of the body. And then if you can also persuade others that these entities are like us, then you've got markets there. So it's like this inward and outward market that you're developing. It's kind of new horizons of exploitation. And interestingly, like when the robot character was first developed by Karol Čapek wanted to create a figure because he was so concerned with the way in which everyone was being reduced to these mechanisms, right? The politics of the 1920s and 30s in Europe. They just had a war in Russia, the revolution in Russia. There was Fordism taking off in the United States. There were widespread political movements. That's why robots rebel, by the way. They got the idea from the socialist revolutionary movements in Europe and around the world. And what happened was he put his play into the world because he wanted people to engage with it as a means to reflect on what was going on. And what happened is other artists took the robot play and they started turning the robot into a machine. Because the first plays, they weren't characterized, even in the play, they're not machines. They're assembled on a production line, but they're not machines. So by 1935, he said, look, I want nothing more to do with these robots. I don't know what I've created. I created these so we could have a conversation about love and connection. And what happened instead is we created, it's almost like it became his Frankenstein monster. It's the monster, isn't it? It turned into something that he wanted to change. So I think, yeah, we need to be talking more with each other. And there's all good reasons. I mean, there's lots of research about why it's good to be with each other, why it's good to spend time with each other, how we learn to regulate our own emotions when we're in the presence of other people, how we can overcome adversity and mental health difficulties, how we can develop a set of values, there was a talk earlier, that are connected to our sociality, our political values can like arise out of these connections we make with each other. So yeah, I would say solidarity is actually central and crucial. Make sure you put that back in. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your good presentation again. Yeah. I'll introduce next presenter. His name is Rachid Alami. Where is he? Oh, he participated in on-site. So yeah, Dr. Rachid Alami is a senior scientist at LAS, CNRS. He received an engineer diploma in computer science in 1978 from ENSEEIHT. It's so hard to pronounce. A PhD in robotics in 1983 from Institut National Polytech and on Habilitation HDR in 1996 from Paul Sabatier University. He contributed and took important responsibilities in several national, European, and international research and collaborative projects, such as Eureka. Please give your presentation and give a big applause.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello? Hello, can you hear me? Yes? I don't hear you, that's why. But if you can hear me, it's okay. Can you hear me? No?
Yes, good.
It's good now? Okay.
Yes, 잘 들려.
Okay. Okay, so if it is good, I will start, okay, because I don't hear you, okay? So I'm very happy to be here. We have started a little late, so I don't know if I have time to go a little further than 9:10, than the 35 minutes or no. So please tell me 5 minutes before in order for me to stop, okay? So I'm very happy to be here and, sorry. Sorry, I'm feeling uncomfortable because I don't hear you.
Yeah. Okay.
Now it's better.
Yeah.
Now it's better. Good. Very good. Thank you. So I will give a presentation about my topic is the cognitive and interactive robot, and my challenge is to develop the cognitive abilities of a robot, cognitive and interactive abilities, to allow it to be pertinent, to be transparent, to be legible in its behavior, and also acceptable when it is performing collaborative tasks with a human. So clearly, the application topic is the service or assistant robot of the future. This kind of robot does not exist today. Or the teammate robot in the factory of the field, again, tomorrow. And these are, I would say, this research I've done, I've not done it alone, and all these people have contributed, are co-authors with me on this topic. Now, my standpoint corresponding to your conference, which is linked to ethics and standards, my standpoint, and that I will share with you, is a standpoint of a robot software designer and developer. Okay, a robot software designer who, I would say, who wishes, investigates in order to endow the robot with effective ability to perform tasks in presence and in synergy with the human. Why? Because this kind of robot, and this is very important, has to adapt, to comply, to facilitate human activities and needs. And this somehow could be linked to ethics aspects. So what is interesting from a standpoint of I would say, a designer and a software developer is that when you add the one parameter, the human, beside the design choices linked to the robot itself, I mean physical robot, it appears necessary to endow the robot with the ability to take explicitly, the term explicitly is very important here, to take explicitly into account the presence of human. And doing this, in fact, it takes you to revisit completely the robot decisional abilities like they were thought before taking into account the human, for the fully autonomous robot, for example. And this, in fact, takes us to somehow more intelligent robot, or more intelligence for the robot that is needed, and perhaps also more subtlety for the robot, and also for its designer. I'm looking to the sorry. There are some chats here saying. Are you listening? Okay, so sorry, everything is going well. Okay, so I have to say something which is important, and this is good, I think, some good news concerning state of the art for young researchers or researchers entering the field. We, in fact, nothing is fully solved or finished today on this topic. We have just started to investigate interesting issues. We are just at this level, just scratching the surface. And the more we scratch the surface, the more we find that this problem is huge, very interesting, and very large in its I would say depth and implications and needs. Even though we are quite, I would say, ambitious in the sense that there is a community of roboticists who are working in order to effectively equip the robot or develop these abilities of the robot to conduct collaborative and interactive task achievement, and to progressively develop what we could call a comprehensive framework for designing, for implementing, and also for evaluating human-robot joint activity. From time to time, I'm proposing some citations in my slides for those who could be interested. And sources of inspiration for this kind of work are, I would say, comes from different places. First and before everything else, I think it is important for us and to mention it, even as scientific, is our intuition and experience as humans, ourselves. How do we behave towards the other humans? This is key and very important, I think, in the design of our system. Also, there is very interesting work that has been developed over the years in different communities that we need to take into account and to consider when looking at this aspect. From one aspect, you have all the work which is done on multi-agent, dialogue, belief, desire, intentions, I would say architectures. The other one is, and very interesting, is all what is linked to developmental psychology. I'm citing here some famous people working on this. And also, there is a community called the Joint Action Community who studies specifically how humans perform joint action together, which is for us very inspiring. And we are so much interacting more and more with this community, joint action community. So this is in fact so. Hello? Yeah. I've been unmuted, I don't know why. Joint action can be regarded as any form of social interactions where two or more individuals, here humans, coordinate their actions in space and time to bring about a change in the environment. And what is interesting concerning this aspect is that the joint action meetings that are organized every 2 years, this is biennial, started in 2005. And we, as roboticists, joined this, I would say, these meetings in 2013 in Berlin. And now we're trying to contribute and took day by day and exchange inspiration from this community and exchange with it. What is very interesting in this studies of joint actions is that to study, because it helps to better design, when things go awry, okay? Because very easily things can go awry, and we humans are very good in detecting, adapting, and also to the other when working together, and also very good in estimating if the other is, I would say, satisfied with our behavior, is committed, or is not interested anymore with the actions we are doing together with this other person. And this is key for the robot designer. Now, when we come to the human-robot joint actions, these are the kind of applications we envisage, of course. The service robot, the robot in the factory, or the assistant robot in different situations. And the questions that we ask ourselves concerning decisions is, how are we humans able to collaborate successfully, and what is necessary in terms of ingredients to be a good partner in the sense that I mentioned. And this is why, as I said, with this joint action community, we have created a series of workshops on human-robot joint actions, where we bring together psychologists, philosophers, roboticists. We have already organized 12 workshops on this topic, co-located with main conferences in the topics, going from JAM to Robotics HRI, to the main robotics conferences, also to robot philosophy. By the way, the next one will be in Helsinki in August. What is important here is that, in fact, this we consider two dimensions somehow. The shared and decisional level, which is a task planning, but also the low level, the execution level, which is called by our colleague philosophers the shared proximal or action refinement level. And also it is interesting to I would say, investigate situations where coordination is enough and situations where collaboration is needed. In these joint actions, what is very interesting is that they make and they show the importance of this self-order distinction and manifestness between the two agents who are involved in the joint actions, the notion of common ground, perceptual common ground, and also common ground that exists before starting the process, the notion of mutual manifestness that is permanent in performing joint actions, the absolute need of understanding intentional action of the other. And all this is key for us when we come to the design of the robot decisional abilities. And this will take us to these notions of shared affordances, of shared planned elaboration. Very often we need to share the elaboration of a plan before executing it. This notion of commitment and commitment management, and also some duties and obligations that are linked to joint actions that concerns the two, I would say the two agents or the two humans involved in the joint actions. The notion of persistency of the goal, of the joint goal, also the need of informing about our own decision, the other partner, and also the importance of the signaling and the behavior, the facilitation behaviors. From a robotics point of view, we take, I would say, a constructive approach because we want to build systems, we want to build robots. And so we have, and I will give examples, this is my topic here, as I would say, as essentially as example, on, from one side, abilities to perform situation assessment and to interpret correctly the collaboration situation, and from the other side, the ability to synthesize, to produce a robot behavior, to decide and perform an action. And this goes into two issues. What is key for the first one, and I will show it in some examples, is that it is important when we humans perform situation assessment in joint actions, we don't do it only for ourselves, but we try also to estimate the mental state of the other. This is the notion of theory of mind. This is one key aspect on the first topic. On the second topic, what is important is that very often when we synthesize our behavior, when we are performing joint actions, we do not do it only for ourselves, but we also try to estimate and plan somehow what the other will do to better interact with him. And these two notions will be key in the design of decisional processes that are developed in the HRI domain and that on which I've worked. So this takes me to this now. I would say to start now really the work of the roboticist, I would say, which is building the robot planner. What does it mean to build a robot planner? So let's take this a situation like this, where you have human, you have a robot, and there is something to do in between them. As you see, there is a task. The roboticist will do this. It will endow the robot with capabilities to perform situation assessment, with a high-level task planner, with a motion planner, in order to plan its motion and to perform pick and place operations, for example, here, and then abilities to receive a goal, to update this goal, and also an ability based on the situation assessment to build the current state of the environment of the task from in the robot, so that based on the set of its actions and its constraints in terms of kinematic and kinodynamic models, build a plan. Okay, this is I would say, the standard paradigm of the robot planner. But what happens when this doesn't work?
Dr. Asni, please
finish
it 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so this doesn't work. Why? Essentially, because it is important to take into account in our models the human as an observer, which builds by himself a representation of the world. We have to take into account also the human as actor, because the human will act and will not only observe and model the human as an actor. Another key aspect essential for this kind of robot is to introduce in our models a model of the human as an evaluator. Okay? Its ability to visualize the environment and to accept or not what the robot is doing. Okay? And I mentioned already this notion of theory of mind, which somehow allows to build the models that I'm mentioning here above, and these notions of joint actions. So if you take into account the human as a decision maker performing repeatedly decisional abilities, it takes you to this kind of model. Okay? You have the human and the robot, but not only you take into account the vision of the robot, you need to take into account also the vision of what happened before, okay? The chronicle of past events. The robot needs to know what happened all along the chronicles of events that happened before. From the point of view of the human, considered by the robot should take into account that the human is also perceiving the scene. The human is also building its interpretation of the scene. This is what we call the estimation of the perspective of the human. And the human is also building his own or her own chronicle of past events. And based on this, the robot will have a shared goal this time, not only a goal, and will use its own set of actions, but also will estimate the human actions. And using the joint action protocols, will build an estimation of the human knowledge about what happens in the scene, and based on this, and only then, build what we call a shared plan, where the robot will not only plan for itself, but estimates what the human how the human can act, and how the human could contribute to the task. So, and this is key in the sense that, so when I come to the observer, you have here in red what is linked to the human as observer. You have in blue what is linked to the human as an actor, and in red the preferences of the human, which are used for the robot to estimate the human as an evaluator. And last and essential, we have to take into account, and this of course will interest this community very much concerning ethics. Very important when building this robot, human and robot are not equal at all. Human is not should never be considered as being restricted to the task. Humans need to have at any time the latitude to change her focus or disengage. And so the robot should be able to adapt to this. And also the human might not comply for unknown reasons with duties needed for fluent joint actions. So the robot should not only perform its task, but also be able to facilitate this issue. Which means that and besides of that, the robot should do the maximum to promote its legibility, its acceptability, and also the comfort of the human. So this is the basis that took us to develop what we have called cost-based, in the sense that we define notion of cost and utility to choose the best plans, which what we call human-aware task and motion plans. And so our architecture, and since I will have to finish in 2 minutes, is based on this. Okay, you have the robot, you have the human. They are in multimodal dialogue. They are on multimodal activity observation. The robot observes the human observes the robot, and the robot knows that it is observed. Based on this, the robot, considering that it is sharing the task and the space with human, will have to perform a task, taking into account safety, efficiency, and also issues of acceptability. And then it will plan, okay, taking into account theory of mind. So I will not go into details. I have a lot to say about it, but I will. There are papers concerning these different aspects. I will simply finish here on showing the different ingredients that have been developed and are developed in the community to somehow to endow incrementally the robot with these abilities. First, this notion of control architecture where the different ingredients are articulated. Also a very specific notion of what we call human-aware navigation, ability to navigate between humans, human-aware manipulation, ability to manipulate in synergy with humans, the notion of affordances, which is key in psychology and key here, the notion of perspective taking that I already mentioned, and also the key notion of managing divergent beliefs, because very often, very quickly, there will be divergent beliefs about the state of the world, and the robot will have to take this into account in order to manage to plan correctly and to manage correctly a cooperative task achievement. So I propose, in order to comply with the time, to stop here and to answer questions if needed. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your good questions. Sorry for I would like to give just one main question because of the time limit. Please, any question or comment? Just one man. Yeah. So I would like the closing remarks. I'm very deeply grateful to wonderful presentation to presenter and to ask the audience. I hope the rest of the conference will be more healthy and beneficial to all audience and presenters. Enjoy conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Based on the program, we'll have a short coffee break until for about 10 minutes. And the next session will start at 4:20, which is in 20 minutes, 12 minutes from now.